Welcome everyone. I hope checking for some echoes on my end. I know we're excited to get started today. I actually have a pretty great guest speaker coming up. So we're going to see. Okay. I don't hear any feedback. That's a good sign. So we're going to start it here. So, welcome back to Getting Started Thursday with AI. And we have a special guest today, Kelvin Jenkins, MBA, ACC accredited coach, talking about generational leadership. I'm so excited to have him here. Kelvin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be the Dr. Bray.
Kelvin, come on. This is going to be excellent. I think I've known Kelvin for quite some time now, and I feel like you have a great take on generational leadership. And my questions for you today are all going to be around how can people upskill in different generations? It means different things to different people as they learn. So I'm just going to kick it off and say by saying, how did you get into the space of like generational leadership? Like, how did you get here?
I got old. And I mean that from like the most serious space of all. So I grew up in a 5-generation household. A lot of people don't know that. Great grandparents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, mom, like all inside of the same house for like the first 4 years of my life. So it was a lot of just situations. And then I was raised around a lot of older folks. And then I'm a part of a big church family that is super multi-generational. So you learn a lot. My babysitters were always 2 or 3 generations old. So it's this learning experience my entire life. And then I was always the new kid at school. So you're always trying to learn and figure things out as you go. So I think a lot of it was just like natural. And then some of it was, okay, how do I start reading up on this stuff? I'm a sociology major. You start geeking out on things as you get older. So a lot of it was experience. And then afterwards, it's like, okay, how do I prove what I think is so I'm not crazy? That's
I
how we
like how
got
you
here.
mentioned your background coming from 5-generation household is amazing. One, that you survive the generations because there's different ways of teaching you discipline in 5 generations, as we
Oh,
know,
for sure.
different learning styles.
For sure.
How about you in your career? I know you've managed several places, you've been lead to several different organizations. Like, how do you think that also helps shape kind of your thoughts in this space?
Yeah. So I started off in like one of my first jobs was working with a gentleman who was an electrician. Transitioned from there, went into a startup tech company, which is still on the map today, and I'm partnered with now. And then I went into the corporate space, and I was like, oh, this is different. So I went into medical and healthcare, which, if you don't know, it's very generationally diverse, but for different reasons. So most of the leadership is older, and most of your frontline staff members are younger. And I ended up being on a team with someone who had been there for 20 years as my counterpart. That was my first introduction to a W-2 job. And everyone in my department was at least 20 to 30 years older than me. And I had to navigate and figure out how to not just fit in, but also at that age, you want to like, I want to make a mark. I'm out of college. I'm like, I had a really good mentor though at that organization. We're still close to this day, and she kept me from a lot of issues. And I brought a lot of tech ideas and like, hey, can we? What about maybe? And she was open minded just enough to allow me to try some things. So it really worked out.
Now, you bring up something very interesting. I think when everyone comes out of school, you do have like an idealism, right? You're kind of like from the textbook version or what you think the world should be. And when you
Sure.
enter the workforce, you hit this, for some of us, you hit this wall of what is. How did you get through that, right? How did you get your ideas implemented when you hit this is how things are happening here, and that's it?
Yeah. So I think my experience was a little blessed in some cases. So I was supposed to get trained in my first 2 weeks on the job. I was supposed to get trained by another lady who had been there for 25 years. She decided that she was going to go on PTO and never come back.
Oh, okay.
And so that left me in like kind of a bind to have to figure stuff out. And so it gave me kind of a fresh, like, all right, I got to just figure it out. Reached out to someone else, and I had a bunch of questions. Like, I came in with a bunch of ideas, but I genuinely had a lot of, so I was asking like, hey, what about this? Hey, how can we do it this way? How come this happens? And I wasn't questioning, because sometimes, and I've been in a conversation this past week with a friend of mine and a mentor, sometimes we'll ask questions just to question people, just because I think my way is better. I want to do this. And there's a difference, and people can feel when you're like, hey, I
Mm.
genuinely don't know. And I would say that. I was like, hey, I don't know how this works. This is what I'm seeing. I don't understand why this is going on. Can you help me understand?
Yeah.
And what that did was sometimes they didn't have an answer. And they were like, well, we just do it this way. And I'd be like, well, I get that, but like, is there a reason why? And when we would hit that, I would offer, suggest like, well, is it okay if I try this thing? And sometimes it'd be a no. And I had to be okay with that. My pride got hit a little bit, like, man, I know my idea would work, but I needed to build trust with this individual and with the team that I was on, that, hey, you're not just some new person showing up trying to tell us what to do from an outsider's perspective, but you genuinely care about what's happening. How do you make this better? So before they would buy in, they had to buy into the trust factor. And I
Mhm.
had to earn some trust and respect through the team. To your point, you come in like, I got ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody, sometimes people don't care about your ideas because they don't know you. They don't know if you're going to be here long. They don't know if you really try to understand the team. Are you just trying to get ahead? And my ethos was never, I've never been someone who wanted to climb a ladder if I had to climb on people's backs. So
Mm.
you have to build trust that way. And that was kind of what helped me out. Now, not everything do people say yes to. We got enough yeses, though, that we got somewhere.
Yeah, there's something I used to always say, which is like ideas are a dime a dozen, but execution is priceless. Right? When you talked about that trust factor, I think for me, a lot of times I tell people you get competent in something first, like you be able to do the job well.
Mhm.
You get credible. People know you do the job well. And at some point, there's a transition. Like you said, if you have the right mindset, the right heart to approach it, you get trusted.
Yep.
Right. And that's like, I like how you said, once you get to that point, then the ideas, the questions, they kind of have more reception, but you probably made it through those stages where they started to believe you.
Oh,
And so
absolutely. Absolutely. I think I love how you've broken that down into like this framework as well, because it is 100% that, like, I show up, I have to be able to do my job. Like, they like, oh, you have all these ideas, but you're not even doing what we're asking you to. Like, no one wants to hear the person who won't even do the bare minimum of what's being asked.
Mhm.
Now, once I've started to do the bare minimum things, I'm in the work. And there's something in like, you know, this, like, you're an entrepreneur, so you understand minimum viable product. Like, you know what it is to have an MVP, to say like, hey, I tried this little thing on the side. What do you think? And there were a lot of those moments where it'd be like, once they explain why or didn't have an answer, I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna bring them something, and it's not gonna cost me anything. It's not gonna cost them anything. It's gonna cost me time, but it's not gonna cost the company or anyone else anything. And I'd be like, hey, I tried this thing out. What do you think? Can I get your
Mhm.
input? And I would ask them genuinely for their input, because now I can implement it into the thing. And now you've given me some buy-in. Now it's not just my idea, it's our idea. So it's a lot different. So that trust factor again is solidified even
That's huge. That's huge. And the reason why I'm like, slowly digging into this is because we get to the AI space and now we have a ton of new, kind of like a la 1999 when the internet's coming to, right? And you have people who are
more.
still using DOS and Lotus Notes and interwebs and land, all the stuff, right? And you come into this new space of the internet, and we're coming to this new space of AI. And we talk about that same framework. I said that those same questions. Now, how do you approach that? Think about generations. We're all entering this newness. Like, how do we get to those points?
That's a good question, because I came in again, that first job, we were on Lotus Notes. So, and I was confused. I was like, why are we using this? So that was one of the ones where it was like, Kelvin, this is just how it is. And I'm like, okay, all right, yeah, yes, ma'am. But I think right now, especially when we're at influx points, and I think we're at an inflection point with technology, especially AI, everyone is feeling the impact.
Yeah.
And so it's different than someone just showing up trying to throw something on a team. Everyone is feeling the impact of artificial intelligence or machine learning, whatever you want to call it. Everyone is in this trench of like, what do we do? So I think just having the conversation is a great point of like, hey, I'm trying this thing. Have you ever heard about? No, I don't know. Like, beginning to pique people's curiosity about the tool versus having it be like, we're going to do this. We need to do this inside the, like, if ever you're doing a change management like in any organization, you throwing stuff on people, you're gonna have people either leave, resist, or try to sabotage the plan. Like you're gonna run into those things. But if the change management plan is like, hey, we know this thing is coming. What are your ideas around it? Well, I'm scared. I don't understand. It's like, okay, can we put something together where maybe we start talking about it? Maybe we can have these little, I used to do lunch and learns when I was
Yes.
transitioning an entire team from more paper files into technology. I was like, hey, we're going to do a lunch and learn. It'll be virtual. I will walk you through it every single week. Questions and answers, bring your ideas. I want to hear it. And that allowed people to get over the fear before we started launching things. And again, they had a buy-in factor. So I think right now we're at a point where at least people should be talking about it. At the very least, we shouldn't be running away from it. We should be trying to understand, like, okay, have you tried it to make a grocery list? Did you know I used it for a recipe? Did like starting it when people are really living makes it easy to adapt for bigger and better things later on. I think it's just a good starting point.
Now I'm gonna switch over. So, oh, Ragu, thank you. I love it. Ragu Iyengar from Wharton's on. He said, "Want to see us leading this podcast? Very exciting." I have a different question, Kelvin. I'm gonna make it a little deeper because generationally, some of us have gone through, have seen recessions, layoff cycles, up cycles, and there is a fear. You talk about recipes, that's cute. Lunch and learn, that's cool. But what about this pending like layoff wave? Right? How do you think the generations are going to react to that?
So I remember the recession from a standpoint of we thought we were going to be homeless, right? So my mom was laid off. That impacted the whole house. We had just bought a new home. So we were inside one of those loans that they were like, psych. Um, and so I get the fear factor. And there's a whole generation that's never experienced that. There's a new generation that's coming on, those after me. So, talk about Gen Z and beyond, no clue what that feels like. They're starting to feel it with the tech. You can almost call it a tech recession that we've kind of hit into lately, the past year and a half. I would say if you went through something like that and you remember what it felt like to be blindsided, what are you willing to do to not let that happen again?
Mm.
So instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, this thing is going to replace my job. Oh my gosh, I'm afraid." No, you have experience now where you've seen, okay, if I don't at least take some steps to learn something different, people don't care about me the way I think they do, especially companies. And I'm not trying to be mean or rude. I mean, Meta just laid off low performers on Monday. I mean, everyone is in an organization, you're a number. And I hate to put it that way, but I learned that in my first year working at North, I was a number. And so if you want to prevent yourself from being a number, you have to make a decision. Okay, I am going to get with someone who can help me not just be a number, but I can produce on my own if needed. So I don't want to get fired. I don't want to get laid off. Okay, but if you do, let's just go all the way with this. You didn't want to learn the thing. You didn't want to touch the thing. And now you find yourself on the back end of like, oh my gosh, they're getting rid of my position because I didn't. Now what?
It's real.
So if that's the reality that you're afraid of, what steps are you willing to take now to start helping prevent some of that from happening? And especially if you've been through the whole recession game, if you've seen the dot-com bubble, like if if you know better, do better. Like that is an old age adage. So we're at a very good place where you can get in early enough to
Mhm.
start learning how to use the technology. And especially with AI, there's so many ways you can use it. Like I'm leveraging it in ways that I never thought I would use it.
Yeah.
If whatever industry you're in, there's a way that you can use it to help make your life easier. If you can at least learn how to prompt, at the
Mhm.
very least, you're ahead of most people. Like, let's just start there. And now, once you start getting into the prompt game, you're like, okay, this isn't as scary as I thought. And what do you have to lose by trying to learn it? It's free right now. You can literally open up a Claude account. You can get a Chat GPT account, a Gemini. Like, you can get an account anywhere for free.
Mhm.
And there are online modules that will help walk you through how to learn it. Like, they can come to your Thursdays and say, oh, this is how. So again, to your original question of like these people who have been through recession, who know what it's like when the market changes and you're left hanging out and you're left behind, you don't have to be. Like if you're afraid of the future, do something to prevent that future from being the case. And I think and that goes back to what you said in your newsletter, I think, which is a great point. You have to have a growth mindset in this game. And it's not just for technology, it's for everything. And if you've experienced some things, you have more experience to tap into what it is that you're passionate about now versus
Yeah.
waiting afterwards and trying to play catch up to bills and this and that. And that. Prepare.
Prepare.
And you have the experience to be prepared. So I know it's probably a lengthy answer, but hopefully that.
No, that was excellent, Kelvin. Like, one, I appreciate you sharing your story, what your mom went through, what you all went through, that experience, what it felt like, and just doing the what if we get worst case scenario. How am I preparing myself? Right? What are my passions? How can I use the skill set? Learning how to prompt, like that. Those are just practical things to do, and kind of why we're here Thursday to do it. And I know I'm going to share a screen real quick because I think Kelvin brought up some really great things, and it's something we want to talk about just briefly before we just hop off. And Calvin, you mentioned this, like, you want to learn a skill and we want to build these bridges. And one way to do that, if you're afraid right now, no matter what generation you are, think about pairing with someone to do learning. And this is almost like an accountability partner plus someone who might have a different frame of mind, right? So as a younger worker, you might have more fluency with like TikTok and maybe AI. If you're more experienced, you have industry wisdom, and both of you have a chance to teach each other. You have something to learn and to teach, and there's value on both sides. And in the space we're in right now, there's rapid learning and rapid sharing. That's kind of like a symbiotic moment we're having all together. Here's a shot for y'all to take a screenshot of. This is what I would call a 10-minute action plan. It doesn't take that long. This is getting started Thursday. We're not here to like drag you down over the week. Find someone that you think is open and that you can have some trust and safety feeling with. Map out 3 areas that you think you have skills to give and 3 things you want to learn. Maybe you want to learn about healthcare. Maybe you want to learn about welding. I mean, that's a space that actually I do want to learn about. And there's a person who wants to teach me. So, I mean, those are things to think about, because using your hand is also like using a different part of your brain, and that can enhance overall the learning experience. Create a learning pact. Let's schedule coffee 30 minutes, virtual or in person. Choose one of those skills, exchange it, and like do a mini session, right? And make it official, put it on the calendar. So this is just something to think about as we go through this process. And the last thing I will mention before we hop off is, of course, something I want to share so that people know how to get in contact with Calvin, because I think you've said some really amazing things and I want folks to be able to contact you. apbusinesscollective.com. As you can see, you can read through his website. That's him and his business partner, Tanya Collins. As you can see here, go through, please take a look. I think Kelvin's work in this space is just phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. Kelvin, anything in terms of how they should contact you? Aside from the
No, I
contact.
mean, email is great. So you can send us an email to admin@apbusinesscollective.com. It's one of the easiest ways, and we will respond back to you. Um,
Okay.
yeah, like I said, I'm happy to be on your channel. So I'm just here,
Great.
Crystal. I'm just here.
I love
Dr.
it.
Bray.
I love it. I love it. And the last thing we'll say is loop effect. If you like this week's conversation, talk about generational leadership, talk about generational upskilling, um, enroll or subscribe to Loop Effect. We talked about age is just a number, the new science of learning. You can see our latest article in the archive, but sign up to catch more. I'm going to leave you with whatever Kelvin wants to say last. Kelvin, what do you have for people?
um, I will say that first, keep showing up to these Thursday sessions have been great bite-sized ways to advance your life for the better, right?
Mm,
So, and what you said, find a reverse mentor, find someone who's younger than you, find someone who's older than you, and share information. It's the best way. Like staying curious will keep you alive.
yeah.
So, thank you, Dr. Bray, for having me. I'm just happy to be here. Appreciate everybody for showing up. Thank you for your questions.
Yeah, wonderful. And Kelvin, we thank you for being on the show. And hopefully, y'all will see you in 2 weeks. Next week, we're taking a break. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And Kelvin, come on back. See you soon.
Anytime.
Okay.
Anytime.
There you go.